Before we get started, just a quick note, spoiler alert.
And we are adults, and I will try very hard not to use adult language, but this is the warning.
Hello and welcome back. Okay, hello and welcome back to Fright Bites. My name is Jennifer.
And I'm Serena. Each episode, we will feature a short story or novella. You can read along with us by finding the full reading list posted on our website, lastlibraryontheleft.com, or our social media at LLOTL Podcast.
And today, as promised, we are talking about the second book in the Molly Southbourne duo. It's titled The Survival of Molly Southbourne by Tade Thompson. It was published in 2019 by Tor.com. I'm sorry to those that had to wait 2 years to read the second book.
Oh, shit, right, you're right.
Yeah, sorry. Glad that was not me.
Yeah, no.
So here is the summary from Goodreads, which is where I'm getting most of the summaries. So here we go. Who was Molly Southbourne? What did she leave behind? A burnt out basement, a name stained in blood, bodies that remember murder, one of them left alive, a set of rules that no longer apply. Molly Southbourne is alive. If she wants to survive, she'll need to run, hide, and be ready to fight. There are people who remember her, who know what she is and what she's done. Some want her alive, some want her dead, and all hold a piece to the puzzles in her head. Can Molly escape them, or will she confront the bloody history that made her?
I really liked book 2. I think book 2 is my favorite because book 2 had all the answers, first off.
Yes.
But I also think it was a very healing book.
Yeah.
There was a lot more redemption. There was a lot more that internal communication about resolving trauma and how to move forward. I really, really liked it. In fact, I have one note for this book because I was so pulled into book 2. I have one note and it says, this book feels very, quote, I release myself from versions of me that I created just to survive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
what this feels like.
That is for sure. I agree with you. I think this book was about resolution and trying new ways of attacking the same problem, figuring out the history behind the problem and what's really going on, things that therapists tell us, you know? Mm-hmm. So one of the notes that I wrote was that original Molly grew up and tried to have a normal life. It didn't work out for her. Is it because this one had to try harder, or is it because the new Molly had more success than the previous Molly? So I wrote, is it because this one had to try harder, or is it because she had more knowledge of resolution than the original Molly? And then I was like, it led me to think of my life now as opposed to who I was when I was younger.
Yeah, this one, it made me feel similarly, which is why that's the one note I have, because when I first read that quote on someone's like Facebook or Instagram or something, I was like, that is so impactful and that is so deeply personal, because I created a lot of versions of myself during that time I had my sister and our brother and everything. And they were not better versions of me. They were not necessarily good versions of me, but they were the versions of me I needed to survive. And it has only been in the last couple of years where I was like, I'm allowed to let go of those pieces of me. I'm allowed to heal them and tell them that they're done, that they don't have to stand guard anymore, and that they can be at peace. And so this is what that book felt like.
Yeah, this one was really releasing, as far as it was really therapeutic is what it was. Very therapeutic, even though it did not shy away from its horror, of course.
Oh yeah. No, the body gore though, I feel was wholly centered on the professor.
Yeah. That was really gross.
Yes. But not fascinating.
It was insane.
Yes.
The way that clone, the seed, whatever it was that was in him, the cancer, the way that they described it, the way it was growing inside of him and deteriorating him was just so fascinating and so disturbing.
I don't know about you, but it felt like theoretically the Mollys are unwanted children. They create new generations because even though they have her memories, they start their own lives.
Yeah.
So he was pregnant with a Molly.
Yeah.
And it felt so much like, to me, like an unwanted pregnancy, and the way that he dealt with it and couldn't get rid of it, had to host it. He felt the consumption from within, and it felt like a woman who is being forced to carry. And I was like, this is so traumatic. If that was what Tade Thompson was going for, bro, I respect you.
gosh. It it was horrific. And I think I've already mentioned that my imagination is really bad as far as like I over create scenarios in my head. So this one, I was really going for it. And it was intense and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I have never seen it done that way with a man before, right? I think that was the thing, that this was a man that was experiencing it. It wasn't a female, because we can probably point out a piece of literature or media where that we've seen that happen.
Yes.
Now we will see it in real life because we're in Texas and there's that law. So again, very well written, very well described, very intuitive. He was very intuitive in his writing and how he wrote about the ways in which we deal with things and interpreting it and reapplying it to the male perspective.
Yes, it was fascinating to watch the professor come to the realization of what was happening and then intellectually try to prevent the death and trauma to his body he knew was coming.
Yeah.
And then to get that far and to still fail. I don't know about you, but I was kind of hoping that he would figure it out, because I thought, no, you weren't.
I was mad at him.
Oh, I mean, yeah, he was okay. He wasn't as bad as that other dude that she had been fighting.
Right. Yeah. He wasn't as bad, but I was still mad at him.
Because I was definitely happy that that dude died.
Yes.
That was kind of funny.
That was funny. That dude was, man, he made me so mad.
Oh, I know. What a predator, and like what a way to go out. That felt good. But the professor, his manic attempts to prevent his oncoming death felt so, I don't know, I was really fascinated with his side story. Anytime we came to a part of the chapter where it had his notes and his video, I was like, oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. They were just so interesting. And it was a nice break from the Molly story, I believe. Because sometimes when you get those other viewpoints, you're just like, oh my God, like read through. This was a good break in between the Molly story and the Molly saga. And it helped move along the plot to me. It helped move along the plot really well.
Yeah, because new Molly, she is still being attacked by other Mollys, and she's sterile, so she can't create Mollys. But there are Mollys out in the world that exist that had not been blotted. They must be able to occur from the most microscopic strand of DNA.
Yeah, I remember thinking, like, what about when she's on her period? You know what I mean? Because we bleed a lot, and so there are just so many opportunities for the Mollys to be created that she couldn't have gotten them all.
I think you're right. I think that when she's in the shower during her period, some of it went down the drain.
Yeah,
blood somewhere.
And I mean, she was very thorough, but there's just no way when it comes to blood.
Right.
It was interesting. I have a note wrote down here like, wait a minute, the clones don't have to be murderous? What are you saying? Because I was so shocked. I was like, no. That's what we've known, is that they were going to murder you. And we meet Tamra, and her clones are not murderous. They just like her own little girl gang, and it's like, wow, look at that, they're just all harmonious and helping each other, and the Mollys just cannot.
I think that's the difference between being raised by the mom, who thought it needed to be a militant reaction, shoot now, ask questions later, versus Tamra, who you're not really sure who raised her. You think it's probably the same group that created them, and in that mindset, the group has probably learned over time that the clones can become docile, that they can just be regular people. But the Tamras have their own relationships and their own jobs, their own lives. And I really, really liked the Tamras, and that they were a reflection of what healing can look like. I loved the Tamras. Every once in a while, I thought maybe they were a little suspicious because they worked with the group, and I did not trust the program.
Right. Same. Didn't trust the program either, and was like, oh, they've been giving a serum so that they are more docile and that they can be manipulated. I wasn't sure. But yeah, I did like the Tamras too for what they represented.
Because, not everybody handles trauma the same way. And so two people who experience the same trauma, and one of them getting stuck in a cycle of repeated trauma and self-harm, and the other person learning to live with that trauma and to make it work for them and to heal.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is Tade, you, sir, this was brilliant.
So good.
The second book, I think, is something that will stick with me forever, if not the duology as a whole.
The duology as a whole will stick with me. They were so great together. And like I said, I was fine with the first one ending the way it ended. Didn't realize I needed the second one. Loved the second one just as much as I loved the first. I still think the first is probably my favorite. It was so different from some of the other horrors I've read that I think that's why it imprinted on me.
See, I think I like the second one because the professor's body horror, it was such a grotesque and fascinating look at body horror to me. And then it had Tamara, and all of the second book was just, I felt it was very cathartic for a horror.
It was. It was addressing horror completely different from some of the other horrors that we've read and talked about. So I did write one thing that I was like, I can't tell you until we're on air because like, I don't know how you're going to react. And I thought, this is my very first note. Is this what a changeling goes through when they're switched?
Shit.
Because we only know about the human person. You never get the changeling's point of view.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to recommend a podcast episode to you. There's, I forget what the podcast is called, whatever, I'll look it up later, but it has an episode or series, this run of episodes on a woman believing that her child has been spirited away and she has a changeling now in her house and her husband not believing her, and what she does to expose the changeling. And so you get a little bit of the changeling's perspective. But you're right, this is like a way intense version of what a changeling adapting to being the new And changeling folklore is really weird.
It really is. And I was like, I think once we're done with the 31 days, I might take a little deep dive into the changeling lore just because it bring it up a lot. And I'm like, it's so fascinating.
It's just like a new way to think about it, because I was really like stuck on this idea of intergenerational trauma and healing, but that's an interesting way because the new Molly tried so hard, but there were still aspects of the original Molly's life that she could not reconcile, and the professor was one of them. She had a lot of guilt and a lot of detachment at the same time. So the original Molly lived low profile, but this Molly was like, let's go lower. Okay, and we didn't even talk about it in the first episode, but the fact that there was someone who worked in the program with her mom who had Molly's under his floorboards, and that she like released them, so that caged Molly had the hardest time adapting. She'd been the most abused and she was so reserved. And the Molly that had the physical scarring was the most abrasive. And yet, like, they tried to live like the Tamaras.
They tried
Molly,
really hard.
they really did. New Molly tried really hard to bring these disparate, damaged pieces of her that had been discarded or further abused back into her, and to kind of learn how to live and go forward together. And it probably was never going to be as successful as the Tamaras.
Right, no.
But it was still kind of beautiful to see the attempt. Man, this series really hit personally and deeply for me.
So I read a lot of YA fiction, and the YA fiction that I read usually takes place in a high school setting, and it's usually a girl or a guy experiencing just regular everyday kind of life situations and how they deal with it. Sometimes there are big situations or big problems or experiences that they encounter as far as relationships or like drug use. And I don't want to say they're bleak, but they're just normal people living out normal lives. Sometimes they get a happy ending, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just like, well, we've dealt with a situation and we're just going to keep moving on like you would in normal life. And I don't know, what is it? Realistic fiction is what it's called. This gave me a lot of those feels because those books stay with I have them on my shelf. I have a lot of that realistic fiction, and that's what I tend to get drawn into for YA fiction. And this gave me a lot of that, and I was like, I could really apply this to my real life and do some healing, because we all have healing that we can do, of course. It was just really good. I loved it. I think it's not my favorite of the ones that we've read, but it's definitely up there.
Well, we hope that you guys are enjoying them as much as we are, because some of them are gonna mess you up, and I'm sorry, not sorry.
No, there was one that we're gonna record and release, which I don't know when that will be. Well, I mean, it'll be in October. I just don't know when in October it will be. And I don't have a lot of notes for the book, but I have a lot of notes as to myself and how I consume horror. And so we'll get into that. But and I'll tell you why it's good. Because I can't wait to record those episodes. Those are going to be fun. Because I don't talk too much about myself on the podcast. I kind of keep it pretty tame.
Yeah, I have no qualms talking about the stuff in my life, except for episode 19 was like really hard and traumatic.
That was really hard.
Yeah, it re-triggered me for a good couple weeks. But the more I talked about those things after recording, the less I felt re-triggered each time.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'm sorry, not sorry about the books I chose that can be hard to get through. It's not that I believe in desensitization, because that is also not healthy.
Right.
I believe in the confrontation and discussion and dissection of these things,
Yeah.
which I think the Molly series did beautifully.
I agree. I think the Molly series took issues at hand, put them at the forefront, reinterpreted them a little bit, and the way it was presented, A+.
I would love to figure out what Tade Thompson was doing one day. Was he like reading like a feminist article or a forced carry article, and he was like, yeah, women's intergenerational trauma, but make it body horror, you know?
Yeah. I would really like to know the inspiration behind Molly Southbourne. What came of it? Was it a dream that you had? Because when I hear that, I'm like, oh yes, I want to write stories on my dreams all the time. What was it? Because I know sometimes when I'm watching author talks, they're like, well, I just let the character come to me. I'm just sitting there with pen and paper and the character comes to me. I'm like, how?
Yeah.
So I'd really like to know the inspiration behind Molly Southbourne. Was it an ex-girlfriend? What?
Tade Thompson, if you hear this, let us know. Our email is somethingwicked@lastlibraryonTheLeft.com.
Yes, we're dying to know.
Well, Monster was definitely my favorite out of the series for lots of not great reasons. I think the Molly series, while it was not what I expected, it took me by surprise, and it has sat with me much longer and much more deeply than I expected.
Yeah. When I picked up Molly, it was right after I started reading some of the books, and I told you, like, I read Cassandra Caw, and she did something to me, which we'll talk about later. But I think it was after that I told you, I was like, I'm having trouble, like I just have to put them all down. And I think we didn't record for like 2 weeks or something at that point. We were completely ahead, but we just didn't record anything. And I picked up Molly, and thank God I picked it up, because it helped get me back into the groove. It's a good one to pick up. I just really liked it. There's nothing wrong with that series in my mind. Make it a TV show, make it a movie, do something.
Ooh,
I want to
make
see
it a TV show.
Yeah.
It needs to be like, whoever did Orphan Black, pick up Molly Southbourne.
Yeah, make it a good limited series.
All right, guys, I think that's all the time we've got. Please let us know how you're enjoying the list, because while some of them I picked at random off of a TBR, I think that this was a pretty sturdy list.
I think so. I think we have a good range of coverage as far as like representation, storyline, types of horror, interpretations. Very well curated, I might add.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. If you liked listening to us ramble on about horror, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at LLOTL Podcast.
Check out our website by going to lastlibraryonTheLeft.com. Be sure to visit our About Us page to discover our 2 truths and a lie. Or, if you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at somethingwicked@lastlibraryonTheLeft.com.